Hello and welcome to the Uncommon Sense Show. Today we're going to talk about oxalates, or oxalic acid, specifically spinach, but several other greens as well as other plant foods that contain very high amounts of oxalates. We're going to talk about what this means and what it has to do with your health, and specifically the formation of kidney stones. Dr. Greger has made several videos in regards to this, and his recommendation is that if you're going to eat several cups of greens, that you should avoid spinach. You should not predominantly use spinach if you're eating a considerable amount of greens. There are several videos on the subject, and while Dr. Greger does lean towards the belief that oxalates contribute to kidney stones, there are several articles and videos where they do talk on nutrition facts about how it probably isn't oxalates itself. For instance, in this article, Dr. Joseph Gonzalez says that decreasing animal protein and sodium intake is more effective and most likely the cause, or one of the causes. He also mentions a video by Dr. Greger, The Downside of Green Smoothies, which talks about the fact that it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're eating high oxalates containing foods that it will increase kidney stone risk. That being said, the fact that this idea is sweeping through the plant-based movement that oxalates are dangerous, that they cause kidney stones, is worrying to me because I have read every single paper I could find on oxalates. I've went through the papers discussing calcium and oxalates, specifically every single paper discussing spinach, and there's no science indicating a link between oxalates and kidney stones. So you'd have to ask the question then, why is this even a belief? Well, the reason why it's a belief is because there are several types of kidney stones. The most common type of kidney stone is a calcium oxalate stone. There are others, there's calcium phosphate and uric acid stones, but the most common is calcium oxalate. This is why for years doctors recommended that people who are prone to kidney stones should not consume plants, vegetables high in calcium. Now, this error has been greatly remedied, and doctors are less likely today to recommend that. Most competent doctors understand that limiting calcium actually increases your risk of kidney stones, and we're going to look at the studies that prove that. This paper, published in 1993, a prospective study of dietary calcium and other nutrients and the risk of systematic kidney stones, explains the prevalent idea of that day that a high dietary calcium intake is strongly suspected of raising the risk that a kidney stone will form. Consequently, patients with calcium-containing stones are often advised to decrease their calcium intake. However, no prospective data demonstrate that lowering calcium intake decreases the risk of kidney stones. Now again, as I mentioned before, this is less likely to happen today, although still some doctors are telling people to decrease dietary intake of calcium, even though it does not cause kidney stones. The conclusion of this study was a high dietary calcium intake decreases the risk of systematic kidney stones. There is an inverse relationship between the amount of dietary calcium that is consumed and your risk of kidney stones. In other words, limiting calcium containing foods actually increases your risk of kidney stones. This was the 1990s. Today, it's now oxalates. Oxalates are the big no-no. In that day, it was calcium, and for the same exact reason. Why? Because calcium oxalate kidney stones contain both calcium and oxalate, so then they must be bad. If we were wrong on calcium, then maybe we were wrong, or are wrong, on oxalates. Maybe oxalates aren't evil. Maybe we just don't know the whole story. What is very interesting to me is that while this study demonstrated that a high intake of dietary calcium does decrease risk of kidney stones, supplemental calcium, in other words, inorganic calcium, may increase the risk. So they found the supplemental calcium may actually be one of the risk factors for kidney stones. The fact that doctors have been prescribing and telling patients to take calcium for bones, and the fact that people drink a ton of milk, which contains what I consider an inorganic form of calcium, but it more correctly is a incomplete form of calcium, and it actually robs calcium from the bones. So if we're going to look at oxalates, we need to look at the research on oxalates, and we need to determine what the actual facts are surrounding them. And when we do this, we find something very interesting, and that is that avoiding high oxalate containing foods may actually be absolutely useless for two very specific reasons. First of all, this paper in the abstract says dietary restriction of oxalate intake has been used as a therapy to reduce the risk of recurrence calcium oxalate stones. So there's two things we need to look at. First of all, do high oxalate containing foods create a high spike of oxalate in the body? How does it actually affect the body? What's interesting is the increment in urinary oxalate after ingestion of oxalate-containing food items was measured. Peanuts, almonds, pecans, milk, chocolate, instant tea increased urinary oxalate only moderately. Other items, cranberry juice and brewed tea with milk, had a negligible effect. These studies showed that the amount of oxalate absorbed from a food is not proportional to the amount of oxalate in the food. In some cases, but not all cases, rhubarb, spinach, beetroot, peanuts, chocolates, and tea taken in normal dietary quantities raised urinary oxalate by twofold or more in healthy subjects to give abnormally high results. An average portion of strawberries produced a smaller increase, but still a significant increase in urinary oxalate excretion, and is now considered a moderate risk food. Now you need to keep something in mind. Second point I want to make. If you want to avoid oxalates, you have to you can't be a plant-based vegan. You have to stop eating plants because almost every single plant contains oxalates. It may be a very small amount, but they contain oxalates. If oxalates were truly the problem, then plant-based whole food populations would be riddled with kidney stones. But this is not what we find when we look at the large population studies, when we look at the China study, when we look at the blue zones. We don't find that those that eat a higher percentage of plants have more kidney issues. We actually find the opposite, that they have less. So the idea that oxalates are an issue is somewhat absurd. And if we're going to base it on the fact that it has high oxalates, even though in study the amount of oxalate absorbed is not proportionate to the amount in the food. So, for instance, a spinach contains a high amount of oxalate. Another food that contains a very small amount might actually absorb more than the spinach. So what are we going to do? Create a list of every food that has oxalates in it? You might not be able to eat very many plants then. What we find when we examine whole food, specifically fruit and vegetable diets, high fruit and vegetable diets, we find in every single case a decrease in incidence of kidney stones. Greater dietary intake of fiber, fruits, and vegetables were each associated with a reduced risk of incident kidney stones in postmenopausal women. The protective effects were independent of other known risk factors for kidney stones. In contrast, there was no reduction in risk in women with a history of stones. Now you might say, okay, so some people are just genetic and they're going to get kidney stones. No. That's not true. Those that have a history of kidney stones, there's something going on. It's either an issue in their diet, or, and most likely that plus other things, or it's an issue with elimination. Maybe your organs are taxed to the point where you have to understand that kidney stones are not a negative thing. Kidney stones are actually a positive thing where the body is protecting you. Okay, the body doesn't form kidney stones because it wants to cause you pain. It forms kidney stones to protect you. So the fact that the body's producing a kidney stone is in itself proof that the body is trying to protect you. Now, the fact that there is a kidney stone, we don't want that in the body, and the body needs to break that down and deal with it. But sometimes it can't because you're taxing the elimination organs and it doesn't have the ability to eliminate the waste. When you eliminate those issues and you provide proper nutrition through plant-based diets, those issues usually disappear. The recommendation from this study is to increase fluid intake. That would be water. You don't want to increase coffee or sodas, which are negative, but increase your water intake, which dilutes and allows the body to eliminate rather than create kidney stones. You want to lower sodium content if kidney stones are an issue and eliminate animal protein. You want to get calcium from plants, specifically fruits, vegetables, and herbs. You want to stop taking all supplement forms of calcium and stop taking or consuming foods that are fortified with calcium because they are pure garbage. The researchers concluded a couple interesting things I find interesting. One is that it is possible that the intake of fiber, fruits, vegetables are important in initial stone formation. In other words, they might be very much preventing of initial formation, but may be less important, or in other words, may not hold up as much weight in the recurrence of strong risk factors such as BMI, in other words, overweight, intake of fluids, you're not drinking enough water, too much sodium, animal protein, and inorganic calcium. If you have too many of those other factors, it may be that fruits, vegetables, and fiber just really don't stand a chance in dealing with the issue. They also say the nuances of which vegetables are high in oxalate can be confusing, and the information from medical providers or internet sources are often incomplete. Thus, patients may be globally reducing vegetable intake in an attempt to reduce their oxalate intake. Reassuringly, this study specifically found no increased risk of stone formation with higher vegetable intake. Previous studies of fiber, fruit, and vegetable intake have been mixed, possibly in part due to failure to stratify based on stone history. You might say, well, it says higher vegetable intake, it doesn't say higher spinach intake. But we already discussed the fact that it doesn't, the level of oxalate in the food does not determine the amount that is absorbed or its effect on kidney stone formation. Another 14-year study evaluating over 400,000 person years found a few interesting notes. First of all, magnesium intake was inversely associated with the risk of incident kidney stones, meaning deficiency in magnesium would increase your risk of kidney stones, and we know that a large portion of the U.S. population is deficient in magnesium. We also know that if you were deficient in magnesium, you cannot simply take magnesium supplements. The body will not absorb it and it will not help you. The only way to deal with magnesium deficiency is either through a topical supplement, topical magnesium oil, or to get magnesium from your food, from plants and herbs. Those are the only good ways to get magnesium. It's also interesting that they note that there was no association between vitamin C intake and the risk of incident stone formation. Probably the reason why they did not find a positive association, or rather I should say a negative association between vitamin C and kidney stone, is because vitamin C and ascorbic acid are interchangeable in this day and age, and they're not the same thing. Ascorbic acid is a part of, and it's a synthetic part of, vitamin C. It is not real vitamin C, but it is marketed as vitamin C. So when you do studies and you say vitamin C, but you really mean ascorbic acid, you often find there is no benefits to vitamin C, when in fact there's no benefits to ascorbic acid, which is trash. It's trash that is produced and sold for millions of dollars. So just a side note here, off topic, do not take vitamin C supplements. Stuff like Emergent C is ascorbic acid. It is garbage. You do not want to put that in your body. The only good form of vitamin C is from plants. So your citrus, your herbs, but do not take supplement form. Do not take synthetic vitamin C. It is horrible for you. They did studies and they found that vitamin C can actually cure certain forms of cancer, but ascorbic acid cannot. And in fact, there is some research that indicates the possibility that ascorbic acid may increase your risk of cancer. Probably only slightly, but it could. But it has no benefit. That's a side note. At the end of the study, they note that oxalic intake is unlikely to explain the association between vitamin C and the risk of stone formation. They do note that magnesium does not, they did not detect a significant reduced risk with magnesium. And again, This might be due to the form of magnesium that they're using in the study. If they're using a supplemental form of magnesium with deficient patients, they will not notice a significant reduced risk. Also, we have to keep in mind when we're dealing with this question, you don't just throw pills at people. Okay, they're deficient in magnesium, here's a pill. You're deficient in vitamin C, here's a pill. You have to get it from food. The study says our results confirm the importance of individual dietary factors. Foods that are high in calcium, potassium, and magnesium should be evaluated as a part of a diet to reduce the risk of kidney stones. It is interesting that they note that they do say, although vitamin C intake is associated with increased risk of stones, the high amount of potassium in vitamin C rich foods suggests that limiting the intake of dietary vitamin C in men with calcium oxalate nephrophysis is unwarranted. Now again, I want to note that vitamin C is not associated with increased risk of stones. Ascorbic acid is. You will never, ever, 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 ever get a kidney stone from eating too many oranges. Vitamin C does not cause kidney stones. Eating trash causes kidney stones. Never will you get kidney stones from eating citrus. The reason we have a lot of issues in medical research is we interchange vitamin C and ascorbic acid, and often the B vitamins are brutally destroyed in this way, to the point where things get so muddy that we think, oh, vitamin C increases your risk of kidney stones. No, it doesn't. This study, the effect of vitamin C supplements on urinary oxalate and pH in calcium stone-forming patients, found that the data suggests that vitamin C supplementation may increase urinary oxalate excretion and the risk of calcium oxalate crystallization in calcium stone-forming patients. What form of vitamin C did they use? Good old ascorbic acid, also known as trash. I did a video on vitamin C last year. If you want to take a look at that video, it'll explain why vitamin C is not ascorbic acid and why you want to avoid ascorbic acid and what ascorbic acid is made of. If we look at the studies that actually tried to adjust for dietary vitamin C intake rather than just look at vitamin C as though it is all synthetic, we find that dietary vitamin C intake is not associated with stones among men or women, although they usually can find few participants that only consume dietary vitamin C. In other words, most people, unfortunately, are consuming ascorbic acid because on the label it says vitamin C. So it's really hard to do a study when most people are consuming trash, and you're trying to just find the people who are just consuming vitamin C. I don't know what's wrong with citrus. What happened to the oranges? I mean, you can buy a bag of tangerines or nectarines or oranges and get all the vitamin C you could ever need. We have to open a packet. It comes from China and fill a glass with something called vitamin C, but it's really ascorbic acid. Now, this study really fascinated me and actually kind of angered me a little bit, but they found that vitamin C with metabolites reduced oxalate levels compared to just plain ascorbic acid. So they found that two different vitamin C formations, one with vitamin C with metabolites, significantly reduced urine oxalate levels compared to ascorbic acid. They say this is a potential novel finding that requires further clinical evaluation. Interesting. Guess what? Nature put that inside foods containing vitamin C. So if we actually ate the food and ate the legitimate organic vitamin C, it would contain everything we need in our body to not only absorb and break it down and use it, but that it wouldn't actually cause any problems. But instead we create these packages full of trash, call it vitamin C, and then sell it, and then find out it causes issues. Vitamin C might be a primary risk, and ascorbic acid advertised as vitamin C may be a primary risk in oxalate levels. So when people say, well, you need to reduce your spinach, don't have a clue what you're talking about. None of the studies indicate that reducing spinach would help with kidney stones. There's not one study that indicates that foods high in oxalic acid actually cause calcium oxalate kidney stones. What we do find is inorganic forms of vitamins, protein from meat, dairy, and processed food, specifically your processed breads and dairy, increase your chance of calcium oxalate kidney stones. Instead of bashing nature, which has everything perfect, everything is perfectly formulated in that plant for you to eat. When you bite into an orange, everything is perfectly formulated for you to absorb the nutrients in the best way possible. There's nothing better than an orange. That's why they have these things called emergency. It's total garbage. If you want to avoid getting the flu or a cold, eat a bag of oranges. Don't eat a box of ascorbic acid. I hope this helped explain a little bit of the issues surrounding the oxalate myth. I'm not telling you to go out and eat bags full of spinach. You shouldn't. You should be eating a balanced diet. That's why you should be eating different foods at different meals. Don't eat the same food every meal. That's stupid. Eat a balanced diet. Eat fruits, whole vegetables, whole grains. Don't eat GMO grains. Don't eat white bread. Get rid of the meat. It has high levels of protein that is very bad for you. Get rid of the dairy. It causes nothing but harm. If you're worried about oxalates, the issue's not spinach. Thanks for watching. If you have questions, drop them below. I will try to answer them. Please do not complain about the length of the video. I spend a lot of time researching this, and I spend a lot of time in creating the video. If you can't take 25 minutes to listen to a video, this is not the channel for you. I spend a lot of time putting this together for accurate information. And when I do a video, it's based on research over months. So thanks for taking the time to watch. Please share this video with your friends on Facebook, on Instagram or Twitter, wherever you may have friends that they may benefit from this research. If you have questions or a suggestion for a new video on a subject, please let me know, and I will research it into a video for you. Thanks so much. Take care of your bodies.